and a heartbreaking battle with bipolar disorder. In addition, Vivien Leigh was also famous for her passionate relationship with actor Laurence Olivier, who already had a family and 2 children. What made Vivien Leigh live on in memory, yet slowly die in loneliness? Join us as we explore her mysterious life in this video. Vivien Leigh was born Vivian Mary Hartley on November 5, 1913, in Darjeeling, India. Her father, Ernest Hartley, was a British civil servant in the Indian Cavalry, while her mother, Gertrude Robinson Yackye, was of Irish descent. However, there were also rumors that she may have had Armenian or Indian ancestry. This was something Leigh carefully kept hidden, because in Hollywood at that time, having mixed ancestry could be a serious barrier to reaching the top. Her childhood was filled with separation and absence. At just 6 years old, her parents sent her to a boarding school in England, where she did not see her mother for 2 years. During that emptiness, the small, frail girl would often whisper a dream to her friends. A dream that seemed impossible, that one day she would become a famous actress. And then, that dream came true, but she had no idea of the terrible consequences Hollywood would inflict upon her. In the 1930s, while studying at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, Leigh fell in love with Herbert Lee Hullman, a calm, mature lawyer, 13 years her senior. She left the spotlight and married him in December 1932. Less than a year later, at age 19, she gave birth to a daughter, Suzanne. However, for Leigh, the marriage felt more like a compromise than a source of genuine happiness. The turning point came when her manager suggested she change her stage name. The name Vivian Hullman sounded too ordinary, lacking the glamour a rising star needed. After rejecting several unsatisfactory suggestions, she chose the surname Leigh, taken from her husband's middle name, and transformed Vivian into Vivian, a more sophisticated, elegant, and slightly mysterious version. And that name quickly became legendary. In 1935, Leigh captivated audiences with her performance as Henriette in The Mask of Virtue. Her acting won over audiences, and critics showered her with praise. Around that time, she happened to see a play starring a rising actor named Laurence Olivier. The moment she saw him on stage, Leigh whispered to her friend, "I'm going to marry that man." The problem was, both she and Olivier were already married, but Vivien Leigh's heart knew no bounds. One evening, after Olivier finished his performance, Leigh quietly slipped backstage. They exchanged only a few words before she suddenly planted a light kiss on his neck and left, leaving Olivier stunned. That spark quickly ignited into a raging fire. As they both starred in a fierce battle scene in the skies over England, they went from colleagues to confidants, and soon to lovers. Olivier abandoned his wife and children, defying the scandal to be with Leigh, but the constraints of their legal marriage still bound them. Neither Hullman, Leigh's husband, nor Olivier's wife would agree to a divorce. Their relationship had to be kept secret. A secret passion lived in the shadows, both intoxicating and frightening, knowing that such love could ruin their reputations and careers. By 1937, Vivien Leigh seemed to have it all: a rising career and the devotion of a handsome leading man. She believed she was invulnerable until the first signs of mental illness began to appear. During a performance of Hamlet, while playing the frail Olivier, she suddenly fell into a violent bipolar episode. When Olivier entered the dressing room, he found his wife screaming at him, but only seconds later, she returned to her calm, composed state, as if nothing had happened. This was one of the first clear signs that her mental illness was worsening, a crack that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Not long after, an unexpected accident left Leigh with a broken ankle, confining her to bed. During those long, exhausting days, she turned to books to dispel her boredom. It was then that Margaret Mitchell's monumental novel, Gone with the Wind, captivated her. Hearing that David Olsnick was preparing to adapt it into a film, Lee was convinced that Scarlett O'Hara was her destiny. She asked her manager to arrange an audition, but Selnik refused. To him, Lee looked too English, while Scarlett embodied the fiery spirit of the American South. However, Vivien Leigh was never the type to easily accept defeat. Her determination was so intense that Olivier once remarked, "She pursued the role with a devilish fanaticism." Finally, luck smiled upon her when Myron Selnik, David's brother and Olivier's agent, became convinced that Lee was perfect for the role. Thanks to him, the door to the audition opened. At that meeting, Lee lit up the room with a performance that was both fiery and exquisitely detailed. As a result, she won the role of Scarlett O'Hara, a role that would forever change her destiny. But success wasn't without its challenges. Filming Gone with the Wind was hell. Production dragged on for months, and Lee was pushed to the brink of exhaustion, working up to 16 hours a day. 3 directors came and went, leaving the entire crew exhausted and stressed. Her co-star, Clark Gable, was paid 5 times her salary, even though Lee had to shoulder nearly double the workload. At times, both she and Gable believed the film would be a box office failure. However, fate proved otherwise. Gone with the Wind became a global cinematic phenomenon, holding the record for the highest-grossing film in history when adjusted for inflation. At age 26, Vivien Leigh was announced as the winner of the Best Actress Oscar, turning her into a legend overnight. But behind that glorious night lay a horrific scene. Olivier, the man she loved and adored, couldn't contain his jealousy. According to his son, on the way home after the ceremony, Olivier snatched the golden statuette and nearly smashed it on his wife. Years later, he admitted that in that moment he had gone mad with jealousy. However, 1940 marked the legalization of their love. In August, they finally divorced their previous spouses and became husband and wife. However, the price was high. Both Lee and Olivier had to relinquish their legal custody of their children to be together. Their wedding was a quiet affair with only a few close friends and screen icon Katharine Hepburn as bridesmaid. The joy was short-lived. Their first joint project, Romeo and Juliet, was a disastrous failure. They had invested over $1,000 in the play, but the play quickly faded into oblivion, leaving both disappointed and financially struggling. At the same time, Lee's bipolar disorder worsened. Her manager recalled, "She would become furious, her voice hoarse, harsh, and full of contempt. But the most terrifying thing was her eyes. They turned into the cold gaze of a stranger." After such outbursts, Lee often couldn't remember what had happened. All she felt was fear, shame, and overwhelming regret. In 1943, while volunteering in North Africa to boost the morale of Allied soldiers, Vivien Leigh suddenly collapsed. Her illness dragged on, leaving her frail until a year later, when doctors finally diagnosed her with tuberculosis. At the time, they believed she was cured, but years later, Lee and those close to her realized the truth. It was only a half-hearted diagnosis. The disease continued to silently thrive in her weakened lungs. Having narrowly escaped death, Lee longed to return to the spotlight. In 1944, she resolved to revive her career. However, Hollywood did not welcome her back as she had hoped. All the roles she accepted were failures. Lee desperately wanted to appear in Rebecca, directed by Olivier, but the role went to Joan Fontaine. Soon after, she turned down a role in Pride and Prejudice, a decision she would regret for years. These successive failures devastated her, and fate dealt her even more severe blows. In 1945, while filming Caesar and Cleopatra, Lee, pregnant, suffered a tragic accident. A single slip on the polished floor caused her to fall and lose her unborn child. The physical pain was nothing compared to the wound it inflicted on her soul. The shock plunged her into deep depression. Simultaneously, her bipolar disorder caused her to experience violent emotional swings, even disrupting her sex life. She began seeking gratification in fleeting encounters, sometimes with strangers like taxi drivers or delivery men. During a tour in Australia, Olivier discovered a promising young talent, Peter Finch, and enthusiastically invited him to join the troupe. But Finch quickly crossed the line and became the lover of Olivier's wife. By 1948, Lee and Olivier's marriage had fractured so deeply that, according to many accounts, Olivier even felt relieved to know his wife was preoccupied with another man instead of tormenting him with unpredictable outbursts. For Vivien Leigh, 1948 was nothing short of a nightmare. Her marriage was falling apart. Her mental illness was worsening. Her health was deteriorating, and she suffered from chronic insomnia. At times, she couldn't control her impulsive actions, only to later suffer shame and torment. However, amidst these personal setbacks, Leigh discovered her second defining role. Tennessee Williams had just premiered the play A Streetcar Named Desire. When Leigh stepped onto the London stage as Blanche DuBois, she immediately embodied fragility, longing, and despair. Audiences wept, and critics unanimously praised her. But this role also mirrored Leigh's own pain. After more than 300 performances, she admitted, "Blanche pushed me to the brink of madness." When Hollywood decided to adapt A Streetcar Named Desire for the screen, Leigh struggled to retain the role of Blanche. Initially, the director thought she was too delicate, too elegant for the role. But during auditions, Leigh proved them wrong. During filming, her charismatic young co-star, Marlon Brando, briefly considered pursuing her romantically, but refrained out of respect for his friendship with Olivier. With Blanche, Leigh won her second Oscar, solidifying her immortal place in film history. However, as before, the glory of victory quickly gave way to the darkness of despair. In 1953, Leigh was cast in Elephant Walk, but within weeks, her condition deteriorated to the point of being uncontrollable. Paramount was forced to replace her with Elizabeth Taylor. On set, she became paranoid, suffered from chronic insomnia, and began experiencing hallucinations. Without Olivier by her side, Leigh once again sought solace in the arms of Peter Finch. After being fired from the project, Leigh flew back to Los Angeles. On the flight, she suffered a severe mental breakdown. Witnesses later recalled how she repeatedly tried to escape. That was undeniable proof that she had lost control of her mind. Upon returning to England, Olivier had no choice. He admitted his wife to a psychiatric hospital for 3 months. There, Leigh endured painful electroshock therapy, a brutal treatment that medicine at the time believed was a cure. Instead of being kept secret, Leigh's condition was widely reported in the press. And like every Hollywood star, her mental breakdown became the subject of tabloid gossip. Her marriage to Olivier was increasingly fractured. Although they had overcome her affair with Finch, their relationship was now almost beyond repair. They argued publicly on stage, attacked each other in front of the audience, and backstage, Leigh tormented herself with harsh criticism. Some even rumored that Olivier deliberately performed poorly so as not to overshadow his wife. Olivier vehemently denied it, but the trust between them had been broken. In 1956, at the age of 44, while her career was still flourishing, but her body and heart had been pushed to their limits. Vivien Leigh once again suffered the tragedy of a miscarriage. This loss, like the previous ones, plunged her into a deep depression. Ironically, it was at this time that she was playing a tragic Shakespearean role on tour of Titus Andronicus. Reality and character blended together, turning each day into a recipe for her mental breakdown. Sometimes, in fits of rage, she would wander into a public park completely naked. On another occasion, she flew into a rage and hit Olivier with a wet towel, enraging him to the point of kicking her out of the room. After nearly 2 decades of sharing both the spotlight and the shadows, Laurence Olivier had reached his limit. He loved Vivien, but he was exhausted by her unpredictable outbursts. Ultimately, Olivier chose to leave. The new woman in his life was Joan Plowright, gentle, calm, and offering a peace Leigh could never provide him. However, Olivier later admitted that he would never love anyone as deeply as he had loved Vivien Leigh. The harsh truth was that their intense love simply couldn't withstand the ravages of a mind afflicted by illness. Vivien Leigh refused to let herself live in emptiness. She quickly turned to Jack Merivale, a younger actor who accepted her bipolar disorder without hesitation. Merivale even promised Olivier that he would care for her for the rest of her life. In his arms, Leigh found a new source of support, and in 1960, she and Olivier officially divorced. But after the marriage broke down, Vivien's behavior became increasingly erratic. On one occasion, she flew into a rage simply because she disliked the paint color of a rental car and demanded it be repainted immediately. She also insisted on carrying precious paintings by Renoir and Picasso with her everywhere she went, as if they were amulets protecting her from breakdown. She believed the stage could save her soul, but in reality, it only pushed her further into decline. In 1963, Leigh took on a role in the musical Toarich. Sadly, it turned into a disaster. She forgot her lines, sang at 3 times the normal speed, and on one occasion flew into a rage on stage, attacking another actor in front of the audience. There were nights when she had to be restrained and given tranquilizers to prevent her from harming herself. Ironically, despite all that chaos, she still won a Tony Award, proving that her artistic talent continued to shine brightly, even as her mind was slowly declining. But Leigh's strength was rapidly waning. In 1965, while filming Ship of Fools, another incident occurred during a violent scene. She suddenly struck actor Lee Marvin in the face with her high-heeled shoe, leaving him with a permanent scar. That outburst made Leigh a perceived danger on set. Ship of Fools would be the last film of her career. After that, Vivien Leigh had only 2 short years to live. In the summer of 1967, tuberculosis, the enemy she thought she had conquered, returned in full force. One night, while trying to get out of bed and go to the bathroom, she collapsed. Jack Merivale found her, but it was too late. The star of Gone with the Wind has passed away. When the news spread, Laurence Olivier, despite years of separation, rushed to be by her side. Along with Merivale, he arranged the funeral, witnessed the cremation, and scattered her ashes near the home she had loved so dearly. That day, all London cinemas went dark for an hour in memory of Vivien Leigh, the woman who brought to the stage and screen a fragile yet enduring beauty. For Olivier, the pain of losing the only woman he truly loved never faded. It is said that in his final days, while watching one of her films, he wept and whispered, "That was love." And Vivien Leigh herself once confessed, "I would rather live a short life with Larry than a long one without him." It was the saddest and most romantic farewell to a legend, a woman who lived life to the fullest with every passion, and who passed away while that flame still burned brightly in the memory of humankind.
The orchestra will play our theme song.
You know that song, don't you?
Sure I do.
Well, then sing it. Come on.
I've thrown away my toys, even my drum and tray.
In 1930, when America was captivated by heartwarming family dramas on television, On the Good Ship Lollipop emerged as a perfect icon. Under the bright stage lights, Shirley Temple, a small, intelligent, and irresistibly charming girl, became the ideal image every parent dreamed of. But few people knew that behind this sweet image was a completely opposite truth. She was a woman who had to endure the hell of marriage, betrayal, and emotional scars that no one could have imagined. When classified FBI files were declassified after her death, the public was completely shocked to discover that Hollywood's little angel image was merely a cover hiding a dark reality. What really happened to little Shirley Temple? And after the FBI launched its investigation, what did they discover? Do not miss a single moment from now on, because the deeper you go into the story, the more the truth will truly shock you. Shirley Jane Temple was born on April 23, 1928, in Santa Monica, California. Few people realized that behind her radiant appearance was a childhood filled with control, exploitation, and deep emotional harm. At the age of 3, Shirley Temple was first taken to a film studio to appear in a series of short comedy films called Baby Burlesks. Essentially, this was a series of cute comedies that imitated adults using children. In Baby Burlesks, children only a few years old were forced to portray adult characters, wear suggestive costumes, and perform emotional scenes they could not possibly understand. In the episode Politics in Washington, Shirley was assigned the role of a seductive woman. She walked into a senator's office wearing a tiny bra and a string of pearls, swayed her hips, and kissed him on the lips, all under the studio lights and the voice of director Charles Lamont. He was the one who discovered Temple, signed her first contract, and was also the person who made her pay for that fame with dark years of her childhood. The following scenes were no better. In the film War Babies, Temple once again played a little girl trying to seduce soldiers, all of whom were children just like her. The suggestive scenes, the exchanges of candy for kisses, and the self-mocking dialogue about being expensive would make modern audiences shudder. But at the time, Hollywood called it comedy. There were no laws protecting children on film sets. According to historian John Cassan, when a child did not obey, director Charles Lamont would punish them by locking them inside a soundproof black box with a large block of ice. The children were forced to sit in silence, trembling from cold and fear. Lamont warned them that if they told their parents, the punishment would be even worse. Shirley Temple once tried to tell her mother, but Gertrude Temple, who saw her daughter as a ticket to a better life, refused to believe her. Gertrude had been a failed ballet dancer. When she realized that Shirley had golden curly hair, rosy cheeks, and $1 million smile, she saw in her the second chance she herself had lost. From that moment on, Temple was no longer a child in her mother's eyes, but a rising star. Gertrude curled her daughter's hair every day, taught her how to smile and how to bow, and forced her to memorize every single line. Shirley soon realized that as long as she smiled at the right moment, everyone would be satisfied, even when she was terrified inside. Many years later, in her memoir, Child Star, Shirley Temple wrote everything down. I was just a child who did not understand what I was doing, but the whole world thought I was wonderful. She called those children's comedies a blatant exploitation of childhood, a statement that forced America to reconsider the so-called golden age of Hollywood. where children's smiles were bought with tears. In 1934, she rose to international stardom with the film Bright Eyes. For 3 consecutive years, Shirley Temple even surpassed Clark Gable to become the most profitable movie star in the world. But as we will see, behind that dazzling fame was a childhood that had been stolen. By the 1940s, her spotlight began to fade. Her new films no longer drew audiences to theaters. After 2 box office failures, 20th Century Fox coldly terminated her contract. Shirley was only 12 years old, an age when most girls were still playing with dolls. Yet she was already forced to think about contracts, fame, and the risk of unemployment. She later moved to MGM, a studio famous for strict discipline and exhausting filming schedules, often regarded as a destroyer of childhood for young stars. On her very first day at MGM, Temple faced a nightmare she would never forget. She was scheduled for a private meeting with powerful producer Arthur Freed, a man known for launching the careers of many Hollywood icons. But the meeting quickly turned disturbing. In her autobiography, Shirley recalled that Freed suddenly unzipped his pants and said, "I have something special for you." The young girl, confused and terrified, could only respond with an awkward laugh, a reflex born of fear and innocence. Moments later, he coldly dismissed her, as if nothing had happened. It was not just a moment of psychological trauma, but the first emotional scar among many more to come. Years later, in an interview with Larry King, Temple admitted that this incident caused her to leave MGM after making only 1 film. Her words were brief but bitter. "That was when I knew Hollywood was not a place for children. But Hollywood itself was not the only threat." Outside the film studios, Shirley Temple became a target for perverted adults hiding behind fame and intellect. Among them was British novelist Graham Greene, one of the most celebrated writers of the 20th century. In his review of the 1936 film Captain January, he made disturbing remarks about the child's small hips as she twisted her body during a tap dancing routine. In another review of the film Wee Willie Winkie, Greene went even further, calling Temple a perfect little harlot, implying that she was a seductive woman trapped inside a child's body. These sickening words sparked outrage throughout Hollywood. Temple and 20th Century Fox sued Graham Greene for defamation and won the case. The compensation money was placed into a trust fund until she turned 21. However, when the time came, Temple kept none of it. She donated the entire sum to build a youth center, a place where children could play and learn without sacrificing their childhood the way she had. This act revealed the true nature of Shirley Temple. Kind-hearted, dignified, and resilient in a ruthless Hollywood, she managed to preserve her innocence and compassion, refusing to let darkness consume her. But fate was not done testing her. As Shirley Temple grew older, she was forced to face rumors so absurd that even she could not help but laugh. One of the most widespread rumors, which spread across the United States and eventually to Europe, claimed that Shirley Temple was not actually a child. According to the rumor, she was an adult dwarf disguised as a little girl, deceiving audiences and the media. The story spread so widely that it attracted the attention of the Vatican. In her memoir, Temple recalled that Father Silvio Massante, a representative of the Holy See, was sent to investigate. The stern priest came to her home, requested a private meeting, and asked strange questions. What year were you born? Did you have a birth certificate? And could anyone verify that you were truly a child? At first, the Temple family thought it was a joke, but it was not. The priest carried official authorization directly from the Vatican. When the news spread, the The public was both astonished and amused. It revealed a deep level of distrust toward Hollywood, a world so full of illusion that even the innocence of a child could be questioned. Temple later called it the strangest rumor of her life, but said she was not angry. "I understand," she wrote. "When people are surrounded by artificiality for too long, they begin to doubt what is real." Father Masante explained that the rumor had spread widely across Europe, with many people in the music world believing that Temple's fame existed because she was actually a 30-year-old woman pretending to be a child. Some even offered what they claimed was evidence. A few insisted that she had adult teeth because none of her baby teeth seemed to fall out, while others claimed her teeth had been filed down. Of course, the truth was much simpler. Temple explained that she did lose her baby teeth, but wore partial dentures and porcelain teeth during filming to cover the gaps, which helped keep her signature smile perfect on screen. However, this was not the only mystery her fans tried to unravel. Many people became obsessed with searching for flaws in the image of her perfect little girl persona. Some even doubted whether her signature curls were real, to the point that overly curious fans once tried to pull on her curls just to prove it. In her autobiography, Shirley Temple wrote that she actually wished her famous curls were a wig because her real hair was extremely difficult to maintain. To keep those soft, flawless curls, she had to follow a strict nightly hair care routine, which included rinsing her hair with vinegar once a week. The acid burned her eyes and made them sting unbearably. Despite the exploitation and constant scrutiny, Shirley Temple single-handedly saved 20th Century Fox from bankruptcy. After each film, $11,000 of her earnings were placed into a trust fund, which later grew to $35,000. However, she was allowed to spend only $13 a week. The rest was supposedly kept safe by her parents. In reality, the truth was far darker. At the height of her fame, Temple earned as much as $1,000 a week, making her the highest-paid child actor in Hollywood. By the time she reached adulthood, she should have had roughly $32 million. But when she finally saw her bank account, only $44,000 remained. The money from the years she spent smiling for America had been taken by her own father. Shirley did not cry. She did not scream. In her memoir, she simply wrote, "I did not feel disappointed, and I was not angry." A short sentence, yet sharp, cold, and haunting. No rage, no bitterness, only the calm strength of a woman who had seen too much darkness behind the stage lights. Still, the darkness did not release her. At the age of 17, Shirley met David O. Selnik, one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood. A man the public saw as elegant and charming, but behind closed doors, a predator. A friend once warned her, "If he wears silk stockings, stay away." And indeed, when Selnik tried to grab her hand, Shirley looked down. Shimmering silk stockings. The warning turned into an alarm in her mind. She tried to leave, but he pressed a button. The door locked. One room, a 17-year-old girl, a large man moving closer. He smiled. In her memoir, she wrote, "I was faster than he was and escaped." She escaped the room, but she could not erase the memory. Not long after, another powerful Hollywood figure, a man she referred to only as the Wizard, tried to do the same thing. When she refused, he coldly said, "We have to learn how to get along. It is just a workplace ritual." Shirley looked him straight in the eyes and replied without fear, "That may be in your contract, but it is certainly not in mine." That sentence became a quiet declaration, for all the women silenced by the entertainment industry. A world where glamour can never hide the stench of moral decay. But the tragedy did not end there. At the age of 35, when the world believed she was finally safe, George Jessel, a famous comedian, invited Shirley to discuss an important role. The moment the door closed, his true nature was revealed. He forced her into a corner. But this time, Shirley was no longer the frightened 17-year-old girl. She fought back. With a fast and powerful kick, she brought him to his knees, his face twisted in pain. In her memoir, she wrote, "I saw pain, disgust, and hatred flash across his face. But I felt no pity. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor." People often say that child stars rarely have happy endings, but Temple was certainly an exception. She refused to let tragedy define her. After leaving Hollywood, she became a diplomat. She served as the United States ambassador to Ghana and later to Czechoslovakia. The woman once treated like a porcelain doll now stood before world leaders, speaking about peace, dignity, and human rights. Looking back, Shirley once said a simple yet haunting sentence: "I never lost faith that there is still goodness in this world." In 1943, at just 15 years old, Shirley Temple met John Agar, the man who would later become her first husband. 2 years later, they married. The wedding of America's little princess captured national attention. They had a daughter, Linda Susan, and even starred together in 2 films, Fort Apache and Adventure in Baltimore. But behind the smiling photographs was a silent tragedy. Agar became an alcoholic, abusive, and unfaithful. The girl who once made millions smile now lived in fear every day. After 5 years of endurance, in 1949, she filed for divorce on the grounds of emotional abuse. She won custody of her daughter, although the emotional scars would follow her for many years. 2 decades later, when President Richard Nixon nominated Shirley Temple as a United States ambassador to the United Nations, the FBI conducted a background investigation. Shockingly, it was her former husband who tried to sabotage her career. In his testimony, Agar fabricated accusations, claiming that Temple was emotionally unstable and prone to extreme reactions when things did not go her way. It was his final bitter attempt to take revenge on the woman who had left him. But truth always defeats lies. Ronald Reagan, a former colleague and longtime admirer, stepped forward to defend her, calling Shirley a courageous woman with the highest moral character. Agar's accusations quickly collapsed, while Shirley Temple continued to move forward, head held high, unbroken and unafraid. After all the suffering, fate gave her a second chance. In 1950, at the age of 22, when her film career had already faded, Shirley Temple met Charles Black, a businessman and former Navy officer. Just 12 days after meeting, they got married. That marriage lasted a lifetime, 55 years, quiet, free of scandal, and filled with love and mutual respect. When Charles passed away, Shirley said he was the only man who ever made her feel truly safe. But the scars from her Hollywood past never fully healed. In her memoir, Child Star, Shirley recalled a terrifying moment when she was only 10 years old. While she was singing Silent Night live on CBS, a woman in the audience suddenly pulled out a gun and pointed it directly at her. The woman believed that Temple had stolen her daughter's soul, a child who had died on Shirley's birthday. Fortunately, the gun did not fire, and she survived. But the horror of that moment haunted her for the rest of her life. Temple grew up faster than any other child. While many child stars of her era became victims of fame, she chose to leave Hollywood and devote herself fully to public service. From the little girl singing on the lollipop ship to an American diplomat representing her country abroad, Shirley Temple became a living symbol of resilience and rebirth. Life continued to test her strength. At the age of 44, Temple was diagnosed with breast cancer. She became one of the first Hollywood stars to speak openly about the disease, encouraging women everywhere to get regular health screenings. Through honesty and courage, she turned fear into strength. She survived cancer and lived to the age of 85. A long and full life, though never an easy one. When she passed away in 2014, it was revealed that she had secretly smoked for most of her life, but kept it hidden out of fear that children might imitate her. Her death from lung disease became her final reminder to the world. Even the strongest people carry their own burdens. Shirley Temple remains an enduring symbol of grace and resilience. She was the little girl who brought smiles to America during its darkest days. And she was the woman who taught the world how to stand back up after being hurt. Her life was like a film without a script, beginning with wonder, sinking into darkness, and ending in light. Today, when people remember Shirley Temple, they do not only remember the golden curls or the radiant smile. They remember the brave heart that overcame the darkness of Hollywood. She was not just the greatest child star of all time. She was living proof that sometimes the smallest flame can light up the entire world. If you have made it this far, please leave a comment with the number 5 to support our beloved Shirley Temple. And do not forget to like and sub so you do not miss our upcoming videos. Thank you.
He has a place out here, too?
The place used to be the gambling casino. He likes it there.
In 1967, the name Jane Mansfield suddenly dominated the front pages across the United States after a shocking car accident took her life at just 37 years old. Jane Mansfield was not only a beauty icon, she was also a bold, living media sensation on the covers of Playboy magazine, openly challenging moral norms and constantly being compared to Marilyn Monroe in the ruthless pursuits of film producers. Her life was a chain of tragic days. But what haunted the public for decades was her mysterious death and the previously concealed autopsy report. What tragedies did she endure throughout her life? And what secrets does her death still hide? Do not miss a single moment from now on, because the deeper you go into the story, the more the truth will truly shock you. Jane Mansfield was born under the name Vera Jane Palmer on April 19, 1933, in Bryn Mawr, a quiet suburb in the northeastern United States. Her father, Herbert William Palmer, was a German-born attorney, and her mother was Vera Palmer. Fate, however, was cruel to her. When she was only 3 years old, her father died suddenly from a heart attack. For a child, that was not just the loss of a father, but the first moment when her world collapsed. Not long after, her mother remarried Harry Lawrence Piers and moved the entire family to Dallas. From the quaint East, she entered the harsh South, where family values, morality, and social image were paramount. It was in Dallas that the seeds of ambition began to take root. Like millions of American girls of that era, she was captivated by the image of Shirley Temple, the symbol of innocence and purity during a deeply unstable time. But, unlike the later doll-like image the public would see, Jane did not live recklessly. She studied dance from the age of 12, played the violin, piano, and viola, and learned Spanish and German. In 1950, Jane graduated from Highland Park High School, a prestigious school in Dallas. That same year, at the age of 17, Jane met Paul Mansfield at a party. They were young, attractive, and admired, yet lacking real-life experience. Less than a year later, Jane married Paul James Mansfield. The early marriage reflected the spirit of the era. Soon after, Jane Mansfield gave birth to her first daughter, Jane Marie, when she herself was still very young, forced to balance the roles of both mother and wife. However, Jane refused to be buried in the role of a housewife. Deep inside her, another calling always existed, the call of stage lights and fame. She and her husband enrolled at Southern Methodist University, then later transferred to University of Texas at Austin. It was there that the reality of the Hollywood dream slowly became clear. To earn money and survive, Jane worked as a nude art model for art classes, a job considered shocking and scandalous by the society of that time. She went door to door selling books, worked as a dance hall receptionist, and lived under constant scrutiny and harsh moral judgment. Yet it was precisely those years that hardened her. She came to understand that, to survive, one must accept being judged. In 1952, Jane Mansfield returned to Dallas to study under Baruch Lumet, a strict yet devoted mentor who regarded her and Rip Torn as his own children. During this same period, her husband served in the military reserves amid the Korean War. Jane lived near a military base in Georgia, where she witnessed the anxiety of war, the fragility of American male lives, and the deep loneliness of young military wives. In 1954, Jane moved to Los Angeles to pursue her dream. Her beauty and sensual figure opened many doors at film studios in her early years, but most of her interviews ended in bitter disappointment. However, Jane came up with a brilliant idea that would propel her into fame. After repeated failures in Hollywood, Mansfield realized that blonde hair would truly work in her favor, and she began dyeing her hair. In February 1955, Mansfield rose to fame in a controversial way when she appeared in Playboy magazine as Playgirl of the Month, igniting the desires of thousands of men. Yet it was precisely this appearance that turned Jane Mansfield into a name recognized by the public. In 1956, Jane Mansfield landed the leading role in the musical comedy The Girl Can't Help It. However, her major breakthrough came with a troubling hidden motive. Film producers were eager to create a new rising star to compete with Marilyn Monroe, and Mansfield was simply positioned as a fiery blonde rival. As Monroe became increasingly difficult to control, studio executives hoped that elevating Mansfield as a competitor would pressure Monroe into returning and begging for roles. They did not merely use Jane Mansfield as a rival, but also as bait. As Jane's fame rose, her marriage to Paul Mansfield collapsed rapidly. Paul was extremely jealous and possessive. At the time, Jane secretly entered a beauty pageant in California. When Paul discovered it, he forced her to withdraw. He did not want to share her with the greedy eyes of other men. However, to be fair, Jane was not a faithful wife in Paul's eyes. By 1956, Jane's unhappy marriage was on the brink of collapse, and she filed for divorce. Paul Mansfield sued Jane and demanded custody of their young daughter, Jane Marie. He claimed that Jane was not fit to be a mother because of her appearance. Fortunately for Jane, Paul lost the case. While Jane was still in the process of divorcing Paul, she met bodybuilder Mickey Hargitay at a nightclub. He was a Hungarian-born bodybuilder who had won the Mr. Universe title, muscular, handsome, and sculpted like a Roman statue. However, Mickey was not an ordinary bodybuilder. He had just won the Mr. Universe title the previous year and was performing in a chorus line show by Mae West. But there was one person who strongly disliked Mansfield, and that was Mae West herself. The jealous star was furious over Mansfield's flirtatious behavior toward her Roman godlike male performers, which ultimately sparked a legendary backstage confrontation. In 1957, Mickey Hargitay proposed to Jane Mansfield with a massive 10-carat ring, and Mansfield made certain that their wedding would become the talk of the town. She soon married Mickey once the divorce from Paul was finalized. While Mansfield and Mickey were together, they toured as a celebrity couple and became known for their iconic matching leopard print swimsuits and for their Tarzan and Jane-themed performances. However, Mansfield was a woman who loved attention. She shopped, partied, and even strolled down Hollywood Boulevard in revealing outfits. One of Mansfield's most notorious publicity stunts occurred in 1955, when the young actress attended a pool party wearing a tiny red bikini. At the time, Mansfield was starring in the hit film Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, in which she played a demanding and temperamental young star. In portraying Rita, Mansfield was essentially imitating her main rival, Marilyn Monroe, with clever precision. Although Mansfield had 3 children, she brazenly flaunted a series of affairs right in front of Mickey. She was linked to influential figures such as Robert F. Kennedy and even his brother, John F. Kennedy. But the final blow to their relationship came from her affair with Las Vegas playboy Nelson Sardelli. In May 1963, Mansfield was so desperate to divorce Mickey that she insisted they go to Mexico to speed up the legal process. Mansfield then did something extremely cruel. She brought her new lover, Sardelli, to the proceedings solely to provoke Hargitay. After separating from Hargitay, the young actress wanted to take everything from the bodybuilder, and she conceived a dirty scheme. She accused Hargitay of kidnapping one of her children, even though her accusations were clearly untrue. Around this time, a strange and disturbing transformation began in Jayne Mansfield. She had always craved attention, but now she pushed it to its absolute limits, at one point even letting her dress slip off her shoulder unexpectedly. By 1962, Mansfield was removing her dress entirely in nightclubs. These antics caused her costume designer to abandon her. During this period, she became increasingly eccentric, even though Marilyn Monroe had once been her primary rival. By the late 1950s, Jayne Mansfield shifted from film work to nightclub performances, where she became extremely successful. Her late-night sensual shows earned her considerable money. In 1964, Mansfield married Italian director Matt Cimber, a relationship that would become the most tragic marriage of her life. Hollywood no longer needed many voluptuous blonde actresses, so Cimber pushed Mansfield into increasingly low-quality films, dragging her screen reputation into B-movies. In 1963, Cimber and several unsavory male producers persuaded Mansfield to star in the sex comedy Promises. Promises. It was a decision Mansfield would likely regret for the rest of her life. The film included a full nude scene, making her the first mainstream Hollywood star to appear fully nude on screen, and it was immediately banned worldwide. Mansfield's third marriage to Matt Cimber collapsed and officially ended in 1966. Mansfield was unfaithful, as usual, but this time her problems went beyond infidelity. She fell into deep discouragement and began drinking uncontrollably, as if her life were sliding downhill without brakes. In 1966, Mansfield met the notorious Anton LaVey, head of the Church of Satan. Their meeting caused a media storm, and soon the press declared that Mansfield was a genuine follower of Satanism. LaVey even bestowed upon her the title of High Priestess of the Church of Satan in San Francisco. While many wondered whether Mansfield's interest in LaVey and his church was merely a publicity stunt, his daughter, Carla LaVey, issued an even more shocking claim. Carla LaVey said not only that Mansfield was a true believer, but that she and Anton LaVey had a sexual relationship. After leaving Cimber, Mansfield began living with attorney Sam Brody. She plunged into a life of alcoholism and drunken fights. In 1966, while Mansfield and her children were visiting Jungle Land, USA in California, a lion viciously attacked her young son, Zoltan. The attack was so severe that Zoltan required brain surgery and later developed meningitis after the operation. Fortunately, the boy eventually recovered. In December 1966, while her son was still recovering, Mansfield filmed a brief and provocative 2-minute cameo in A Guide for the Married Man, starring Walter Matthau. Coincidentally, it would be the last time she ever appeared on camera. In the early morning hours of June 29, 1967, the final tragedy of the short life of Jayne Mansfield occurred. She was traveling to New Orleans with her driver, her lawyer, and her children, Mariska and Zoltan, at 2:25 a.m. Their Buick slammed into the rear of a tractor trailer that was engulfed in a thick cloud of pesticide fog. When the mist cleared, the truth inside the Buick was horrifying. All 3 adults seated in the front were killed. The front seats were destroyed instantly. Mansfield was only 37 years old at the time. The crash was so violent that police officers and rescue workers needed a long time to fully understand what had actually happened. When news of Mansfield's tragic death spread, false rumors quickly began to circulate. In particular, many people whispered that the impact had decapitated her. One of the main reasons for this belief came from a real photograph taken at the scene, which appeared to show her signature blonde hair pressed against the shattered windshield. However, the truth was very different. When Mansfield's official autopsy results were released, it was reported that she died from a crushed skull, not decapitation. Even so, many people continued to ask, what was that blonde hair doing on the windshield of the torn-apart car? Horrifically, it was actually a piece of Mansfield's wig that had been thrown loose in the chaos of the collision. Nevertheless, the urban legend that she was decapitated has endured. Perhaps the only ray of hope in all this darkness is that all of Mansfield's children miraculously survived the horrific crash. After her death, the Buick belonging to Jane Mansfield became an object of obsession. The morbid fascination of an obsessed fan led him to purchase the car and preserve it meticulously for many years. It is said that the vehicle still contained bloodstains on the seats from that fateful night. It is difficult to imagine that even the glamorous, attention-loving Jane would have appreciated this kind of remembrance. The car was sold for $9,000 at an auction in 1999. One of Mansfield's most infamous photographs shows a young Sophia Loren staring at the actress with a serious expression, while Mansfield beams at the camera and poses naturally in a very low-cut dress. For many years, people wondered about the true meaning behind Loren's expression in that image, and the Italian actress eventually revealed the full story in an intriguing way. It was exactly what you think. The dinner party that night was supposed to be Loren's official welcome to Hollywood, but Mansfield appeared to arrive late, sat down beside her, and attempted to steal the spotlight. Despite any irritation Loren may have felt toward Mansfield for overshadowing her big debut, she insisted that there was never any lasting resentment between them. In fact, for many years people continued to approach Loren with the famous photograph and ask her to sign it as a mark of respect. Now it is your turn to share your thoughts about this story. Let us know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel to see more content. Throughout cinematic history, female stars have shaped the silver screen not only with their acting talent, but also with their bold, unconventional styles. The 1960s was one of the most explosive eras, when the image of a beauty icon was no longer confined to stereotypical elegance, but shifted to a rebellious, free-spirited, and challenging ideal. Stars who dared to go braless on screen not only created a revolutionary visual effect, but also sparked a wave of fashion that challenged social prejudices, morals, and the concept of femininity of the era. Let's explore the daring moments of female stars that changed both the film and fashion industries of the 1960s. Marilyn Monroe, a legend who lives on in the hearts of her fans, was not only an icon of beauty, but also the embodiment of freedom and strong feminism. For her, going braless wasn't a fashion faux pas, but a powerful statement. One of her most memorable moments was when she wore a revealing dress at President JFK's 45th birthday. You certainly won't forget Marilyn stepping onto the stage to sing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," in a figure-hugging dress that drew all eyes to her. And don't forget that she wore nothing underneath, because the dress was so tight she couldn't wear underwear. Made directly to her body, the dress left the audience in awe. Many were speechless, exclaiming in amazement, "Is this Marilyn Monroe? The woman who knew how to draw all eyes to her with just a dress, or sometimes with nothing but a captivating gaze." Although the dress was only a small part of her career, it will forever be associated with this legendary actress. So much so that after her death, the dress was auctioned for over $1 million at Christie's in 1999. But the story of the revealing dress didn't end there. In 2022, Kim Kardashian wore the dress again at the Met Gala, once more reminding everyone of Marilyn Monroe's iconic sex appeal. Despite always being associated with timeless beauty and glamour, Marilyn Monroe's life was not a fairy tale. She lived a tragic life filled with deep pain from her childhood as an abandoned child. Despite being a shining star on screen, Marilyn Monroe never found peace of mind. Her life was a constant struggle between fame and unavoidable suffering. Her death in 1962 at the age of 36 left many unanswered questions. Doctors say she died from a drug overdose, but was it suicide or just an accident? In her complex life, despite its short and tragic existence, Marilyn remained a powerful feminist icon, a woman who chose to take control of her life through daring outfits and dramatic roles. Before her death, Marilyn Monroe starred in the film Something's Got to Give, and is famous for a scene in which she wears a see-through bikini while swimming in a pool. Although the film was never released, rumors about this scene still circulate today. Many fans believe Monroe may have been completely naked in that scene. However, she was fired from the set for being late and unwell, causing the film to never be completed. Marilyn Monroe is a timeless legend not only for her beauty or acting career, but also for her bold choices and personality. Her image lives on not only in films, but also in the hearts of all those who love freedom and power. Although her life ended too soon, the mark she left behind is ever present and will forever live on in the hearts of those who loved her. Marilyn Monroe, with her revealing dress and captivating smile, remains an unforgettable feminist icon. Jean Harlow, a Hollywood icon, was a woman who not only ignited the screen, but also captured the hearts of countless fans through her bold fashion sense and unmatched allure. Although her film career lasted only 9 years, Jean Harlow left an indelible mark on audiences and became one of Hollywood's eternal legends. With her striking platinum blonde hair and consistently glamorous appearance, she emerged as an indispensable fashion icon of the 1930s. The outfits she wore on screen left audiences in awe. It was impossible to take one's eyes off her, especially in the film Hell's Angels, directed by Howard Hughes. Imagine a beautiful young woman with a seductive figure, dressed in fiery costumes, captivating every gaze from her very first appearance. Audiences of that era were drawn not only to her on-screen presence, but also enchanted by her distinctive fashion style. However, not everyone admired Jean Harlow. Critics at the time repeatedly attacked her acting, claiming she relied solely on her looks and lacked true talent. Some even said she should not pursue an acting career at all. But Jean was never one to give up easily. She proved the world wrong by demonstrating her talent through classic films such as Red-Headed Woman, Wife vs. Secretary, and The Girl from Missouri. She continuously reinvented herself and advanced her career despite constant criticism. One of the reasons Jean Harlow became an unforgettable public figure was her ability to create memorable moments in every film she appeared in. Her scenes always left a lasting impression, not only because of her sensual beauty, but also due to her confidence and radiant presence in every gesture. Off-screen, Jean Harlow lived with the same passion and intensity she brought to her roles. Tragically, her life ended suddenly and painfully. On June 7, 1937, Jean Harlow died of kidney failure in a hospital at the age of 26, leaving fans devastated and heartbroken. Many stories surround her death, and one widely discussed reason is that her mother, a devoted follower of Christian Science, refused to allow her to seek medical treatment in time. As a result, Jean endured her illness until it became critical, at which point she was finally taken to the hospital. Some believe that Jean Harlow herself refused surgery and treatment, but regardless of the circumstances, her death was a profound loss to the American film industry. Jean Harlow was buried wearing the pink nightgown she had worn in the film Saratoga, creating an image both romantic and elegant. In her hands was a letter from her partner, William Powell, bearing the tender words, "Good night, my love." This story continues to move people deeply, as it was not only a farewell from a loving companion, but also a goodbye to a star, a legend who lives on in the hearts of her admirers. Although Jean Harlow's life ended far too early, what she left behind on screen and in the hearts of her fans will never fade. She remains a model of a strong woman who dared to express herself and live fully for her passion. Jean Harlow proved that you do not need a long life to become a legend. You simply need to live fully, live beautifully, and stay true to yourself. Sophia Loren, a symbol of beauty and power in Hollywood, always knew how to command admiration. Although she once shrugged at Jane Mansfield's daring satin gown, Sophia herself was no less bold in showing off her alluring figure. One of the defining moments of her career was the premiere of Boy on a Dolphin in Hollywood in 1957. The most striking scene in the film takes place on a small boat in Hydra, Greece. And when speaking of Sophia Loren, one cannot ignore the legendary curves that made her an icon. In a tight, wet dress, hair tousled by the waves, she became a vivid symbol of seductive femininity. A portrait of a strong, captivating woman who never appeared fragile or weak. In a 2021 interview with the New York Times, Sophia Loren openly admitted she was proud of her body and loved showing it off. With admirable confidence and timeless beauty, she became one of the most irresistibly enchanting figures of Hollywood. Beginning her career at just 16, she not only starred in major roles, but crafted the image of a powerful, alluring woman, a title few could surpass even today. Yet such fame did not always bring joy. Admiring glances sometimes turned into unwanted attention. Sophia even had to fight a legal battle when digitally altered nude photos of her were spread on adult websites. She sued a total of 79 websites, just one example of how she defended her rights throughout her career. Naturally, Sophia Loren's life was filled with dramatic and fascinating stories from film sets. One unforgettable incident occurred while filming with Marlon Brando during a kissing scene. With his rebellious nature, Brando made the romantic moment difficult, even biting Sophia's lip so hard she screamed in pain. Still, Sophia refused to let anything dull her brilliance. She dazzled audiences in famous roles such as It Started in Naples and The Millionaires, proving she was not just a beauty icon, but a talented and irresistibly alluring actress. In her personal life, Sophia Loren married producer Carlo Ponti, with whom she shared nearly 40 years until his passing in 2007. Despite many challenges, the couple built a strong and enduring relationship. Today, at 89, Sophia remains one of the last surviving stars of Hollywood's golden age, still confident, captivating, and never out of style. The American Film Institute honored her as one of the greatest stars of the classical film era, a worthy recognition for a life marked by brilliance, struggle, and triumph. Sophia Loren is not merely a sensual star, but an eternal Hollywood icon, where stories of courage, talent, and timeless beauty continue to be remembered. Her legacy inspires future generations, reminding young artists that beauty lies not only in appearance, but also in inner strength and personal courage. Farrah Fawcett, one of the brightest stars in Hollywood, is forever remembered for her iconic image in a bright red swimsuit. However, her success was not built on allure alone, but also on remarkable acting talent and a truly distinctive personality. She became a pop culture icon through her role as Jill Monroe in the hit television series Charlie's Angels in 1976. In an interesting interview, Farrah shared that she believed much of the show's success came from the fact that none of the three angels wore bras. Indeed, the Charlie's Angels stood out with their stylish athletic outfits and striking appearances, winning the hearts of audiences everywhere. However, it would be a mistake to think Farrah's success came only from her sexy swimsuits. She was not just a beauty icon, but also a talented actress, with memorable performances in films such as The Burning Bed, The Cannonball Run, Logan's Run, and Man of the House. Yet perhaps the most unforgettable mark of her career was the famous photograph of her wearing the red swimsuit. It became a defining artwork of its era, and remains one of the best-selling images in history to this day. The story behind that photograph is just as fascinating. Farrah did not use a mirror while styling her hair and makeup. She relied entirely on instinct to create the perfect image. She then selected 6 photos out of 40, and her choices stunned the world. Farrah Fawcett became the idol of millions of teenage boys across the country, with posters hanging in bedrooms and dorm rooms everywhere. You have almost certainly seen that image at least once in your life. Farrah was not only beautiful and talented, but also a strong woman whose life was filled with challenges. Despite her outstanding career, she faced profound hardships, including painful relationships, family turmoil, and devastating health struggles. She battled anal cancer for many years and never gave up. On June 25, 2009, Farrah Fawcett passed away at the age of 62. Yet her legacy continues to live on in the hearts of audiences and fans. In 2011, Men's Health named her one of the 100 sexiest women of all time, once again affirming the undeniable appeal of this extraordinary actress. She is remembered not only for her beauty or her famous swimsuits, but also as a resilient woman filled with passion who always knew how to make the world remember her. In 1957, at a Paramount party, 2 famous stars, Sophia Loren and Jane Mansfield, appeared together. However, this was not an ordinary party, but an event with a surprising twist from Jane Mansfield. She did not just come to celebrate Sophia's career, she also made the party hotter than ever with an extremely revealing satin backless dress. Sophia Loren's reaction upon seeing the dress was pure shock. She could not focus on anything except Jane's cleavage. Sophia Loren, known for her fiery beauty and elegant demeanor, could not hide her alarm when her colleague entered the room wearing a dress that looked as if it might explode at any moment. She shared, "My eyes were glued to her chest. I was afraid it would fall onto my plate." Although this incident is often misunderstood as the cause of conflict between the two stars, Sophia always insisted that there was no resentment. She said Jane was beautiful and meant no harm, and that she herself was simply stunned by Jane's boldness. While the party continued, all eyes turned to Jane. She made her entrance unforgettable by walking directly to Sophia and her companion Clifton, drawing immediate attention to her impressive figure. Chaos seemed to break out the moment Jane arrived, as photographers' cameras clicked non-stop. They could not miss this historic moment. Sophia recalled that when she saw Jane, she genuinely thought she might faint. She could not take her eyes off the dress and feared it would burst open at any second, spilling everything onto the table. The image of Sophia's terrified expression became an unforgettable part of that legendary moment. Although fans repeatedly asked her to sign the iconic photo, Sophia Loren always refused. She said she did not want to participate in that event, possibly out of respect for Jane or for personal reasons. It was a silent but meaningful gesture of respect between two major stars. No one could ever forget the legacy of Jane Mansfield. She was famous not only for her irresistible beauty, but also for her daring personality and impressive acting career. Although her life was full of ups and downs, Jane is remembered as a symbol of freedom and innovation. She became the first major actress to appear fully nude on screen in the film Promises, Promises in 1963, marking a new era in Hollywood cinema. Jane Mansfield's life ended tragically in a car accident in 1967. Still, she continues to be remembered not only for her glamour, but also for her bold lifestyle and memorable performances. From the satin backless dress at the 1957 party to the daring moments throughout her career, Jane Mansfield always knew how to seize attention and create unforgettable stories. Therefore, whenever we look at that famous photograph, we do not just remember Sophia Loren and Jane Mansfield, but also a colorful chapter of Hollywood history, where shining stars always knew how to heat up a party in their own way. Once known as America's sweetheart throughout the 1990s, Jennifer Aniston was not only a beauty icon, but also the embodiment of a resilient journey of personal growth within the glamorous yet unforgiving world of Hollywood. She was born on February 11, 1969, in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles, into a family deeply rooted in the arts. Her father was Greek actor John Aniston, and her mother was actress Nancy Dow of English, Irish, and Scottish heritage. Jennifer grew up in an environment rich with creative inspiration, yet heavy with expectations. Despite showing artistic talent early on, Jennifer did not have an easy path. Her father, hoping for a stable life for his daughter, once encouraged her to pursue a career in law rather than acting. Her mother, wary of the dangerous allure of the entertainment industry, even forbade her from watching television. But for Jennifer, these restrictions only fueled her passion for acting. Within her was a quiet yet powerful calling from the stage and the camera lights. A calling no one could extinguish. Her defining moment arrived when she landed the role of Rachel Green in Friends, a role that not only transformed her career, but also shaped American pop culture for more than a decade. With her natural, charming, and intelligent performance, Jennifer became a fashion icon, a lifestyle symbol, and a familiar face in millions of households around the world. Yet, life did not stop at glory. Jennifer Aniston also endured deep personal pain, broken relationships, relentless media scrutiny, and constant public attention. It was in these fragile moments that she revealed her inner strength, resilience, and admirable composure. Beneath the glow of Hollywood, few realized that Jennifer Aniston, a symbol of beauty and success, was once a young woman struggling to find herself between family expectations and personal limitations that seemed impossible to overcome. Her father consistently hoped she would choose a safer path and become a lawyer. Jennifer, however, carried a completely different dream. She wanted to be an actress, not for fame, but for her pure love of performance. The conflict between personal desire and family expectations pushed her into an intense inner struggle. Instead of surrendering, she chose to confront it. She enrolled at Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts in New York. There, Jennifer was finally able to live authentically with her passion, step onto the stage, and let the spotlight illuminate the most vibrant side of who she was. Beyond prejudice and family pressure, Jennifer also faced a silent adversary from childhood: dyslexia. It turned learning into a difficult journey and often left her feeling defeated and insecure. Yet these early struggles became the foundation of her strength, shaping the woman who would later inspire millions through both her career and her character. But instead of collapsing under pressure, Jennifer Aniston learned to use humor as a shield. She became the class clown, the one who always brought laughter to others in order to hide the sadness she carried inside. Far removed from the flawless image the public later imagined, Jennifer as a teenager was strong-willed and unafraid to be different. That very sense of not fitting in became the foundation that helped her build a distinct identity, not only in life, but also in her career. Before becoming a beloved global figure, Jennifer Aniston endured a long and difficult journey in acting. Her beginnings were not marked by dazzling spotlights or million-dollar contracts, but by small and quiet roles on Broadway stages. It was there that she learned how to capture emotion, listen to the audience's breath, and pour her entire soul into every line. Those moments formed the earliest foundation of a true actress. Her first major turning point came in 1993 with a leading role in the horror film Leprechaun. Although the film was harshly criticized, it gave Jennifer what she needed most at that time: visibility and experience. Still, the road ahead remained difficult. Forgettable roles, public indifference, and mounting disappointment led her to question more than once whether she should abandon her dream. Fate intervened at the right moment. When Jennifer met Warren Littlefield, everything began to change. He recognized something special in her, an untapped energy waiting to be revealed. He was the one who helped her secure the life-changing audition for Friends, marking the beginning of the Rachel Green legend. At that time, Jennifer was a young woman full of ambition, but with no guarantees about the future. She worked as a waitress in multiple restaurants, where customer demands could change in an instant, and pressure weighed heavily on her shoulders. This was not just a way to earn a living, but a lesson in patience, human interaction, and staying calm under stress. She also worked in telemarketing, a monotonous and discouraging job, yet one that helped her strengthen her voice, persuasion skills, and mental endurance. Rejected again and again, she never gave up. There were days when she rode a bicycle through the crowded streets of Manhattan to deliver goods, sweat soaking her clothes and dust clinging to her shoulders. Still, her eyes remained bright, with a dream that never faded. Those seemingly small experiences shaped a strong and authentic Jennifer Aniston. Those years were never meaningless. They refined her and allowed her to later portray working-class characters with depth and genuine emotion. Jennifer did not act only with technique. She acted through lived experience, through the understanding of someone who had tasted every shade of life. Kate Beckinsale, born on July 26, 1973, in the Chiswick district of London, inherited not only her mother's delicate beauty and her father's gentle smile. She was the daughter of renowned actors Richard Beckinsale and Judy Lowe. Kate was like a flower blooming in an artistic garden, radiant, fragile, and destined to shine. But life was never easy. At just 5 years old, Kate faced a loss beyond words. The father she admired suddenly passed away from a heart attack at the age of 31. His death not only took away a father, but also shattered a child's sense of safety. Life continued to change. Her mother later married director Roy Battersby, who had 4 sons of his own. Kate did not resist or withdraw. Instead, she opened her heart and accepted her stepfather as a new source of stability. From a young age, Kate carried the soul of an artist. At an all-girls school in West London, she not only won the W.H. Smith Young Writers Award, but also impressed teachers and peers with poetry and short stories marked by an unusual depth and introspection. She once said, "My family never taught me that art was a choice. For me, it was destiny." And indeed, that destiny led her to the stage, to the camera, and to characters filled with depth and emotional fractures. Although she studied at the prestigious University of Oxford, Kate soon left the academic path behind to enter the uncompromising world of cinema. It was a risky decision, but it was also a choice rooted in loyalty to herself. From that moment on, Kate Beckinsale became not just an actress, but a symbol of timeless beauty and resilience shaped by childhood loss. In her eyes, there has always been something unspoken, as if the woman standing on glamorous red carpets is still quietly conversing with the 5-year-old girl who lost her father on a fateful morning. In 1991, she made her first television appearance in Devices and Desires, adapted from the crime novel by P.D. James. The role did not create media buzz, but it marked the beginning of a journey filled with many turns. She went on to appear in critically respected projects that lacked mainstream impact. Roles in Much Ado About Nothing, directed by Kenneth Branagh, Cold Comfort Farm, Haunted, and Alice. Through the Looking Glass revealed her depth as an actress. She chose her roles carefully and lived fully within each character. At the time, Hollywood was overflowing with new beauty and rising talent. Kate, with her classical British elegance and restrained acting style, remained a hidden gem not yet fully polished for mass appeal. It was not until 2001 that her true breakthrough arrived, a defining role that opened Hollywood's golden door. She played Nurse Evelyn Johnson in the blockbuster Pearl Harbor. Under the direction of Michael Bay and with massive backing from Walt Disney Studios, the film was more than a war epic. It was a statement about love, loss, and sacrifice amid historical devastation. Kate appeared as a symbol of compassion and classical beauty, alongside powerful performances by Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett. The film grossed more than $449 million worldwide. With it, the name Kate Beckinsale transformed from a familiar face in British cinema into a true Hollywood star. This success was not the result of luck. It was a deserved reward for nearly a decade of quiet perseverance in the film industry. Seeds patiently planted, waiting for the moment to bloom amid the storm of blockbuster cinema. Although Pearl Harbor made Kate Beckinsale a global star in a single radiant summer, her path to glory was never paved with ease. Behind the golden ticket to Hollywood lay a journey marked by deep wounds, where beauty was scrutinized, individuality was tested, and self-respect was slowly eroded by words that seemed casual but cut deeply. In a later interview, Kate Beckinsale spoke candidly about her audition with Michael Bay, a celebrated filmmaker who was also known for his harsh treatment of actresses. She walked into the casting room wearing a simple black dress, carrying a calm and reserved British demeanor. "She does not look like a star," Bay reportedly said, and like a familiar reflex in Hollywood, appearance rather than inner depth became the first standard placed under the microscope. Kate was told she needed to lose weight, not for health reasons, but for taste. She did not protest loudly or make a public scene, yet inside it felt like a blade driven straight into the heart of a woman who had lost her father at the age of 5, who had grown up with a fragile sense of security and a constant fear of being left behind. "If I were a younger version of myself, I might not have survived it," she once said, half joking and half painfully honest. Yet within that sadness lived a quiet strength, one she had forged throughout a childhood that was never whole. Because the pain did not begin on film sets. It had taken shape long before, deep in the heart of the little girl named Kate. The sudden death of her father, actor Richard Beckinsale, the gentlest light in her life, left behind a void that nothing could fill. From then on, she believed tragedy could strike at any moment. Out of that belief, she built a shell, cool and rational on the outside, yet fragile at its core. Adjusting to a new family after her mother remarried director Roy Battersby was not easy either. Suddenly, there were 4 stepbrothers in the house. Kate had to learn how to grow up in a world full of noise, friction, and constant collision. She began smoking before the age of 20, not as an act of rebellion, but as a quiet escape, a way to blend into a rhythm of life she was forced to accept. What mattered most, however, was that Kate never allowed the darkness to define her. She learned how to turn pain into momentum. She did not shout to demand justice for beauty being judged, but she endured, silently and resiliently. In a world where appearance is so often placed above talent, she continued to exist, steadfast and unbroken. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed this show, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to give us more motivation and to make sure you don't miss our next videos. Vivien Leigh was an English actress, best known for her roles in classic films such as Gone with the Wind and The Streetcar of Desire. However, behind that brilliant career were forbidden love affairs and a heartbreaking battle with bipolar disorder. In addition, Vivien Leigh was also famous for her passionate relationship with actor Laurence Olivier, who already had a family and 2 children. What made Vivien Leigh live on in memory, yet slowly die in loneliness? Join us as we explore her mysterious life in this video. Vivien Leigh was born Vivian Mary Hartley on November 5, 1913, in Darjeeling, India. Her father, Ernest Hartley, was a British civil servant in the Indian Cavalry, while her mother, Gertrude Robinson Yackye, was of Irish descent. However, there were also rumors that she may have had Armenian or Indian ancestry. This was something Leigh carefully kept hidden, because in Hollywood at that time, having mixed ancestry could be a serious barrier to reaching the top. Her childhood was filled with separation and absence. At just 6 years old, her parents sent her to a boarding school in England, where she did not see her mother for 2 years. During that emptiness, the small, frail girl would often whisper a dream to her friends, a dream that seemed impossible, that one day she would become a famous actress. And then, that dream came true, but she had no idea of the terrible consequences Hollywood would inflict upon her. In the 1930s, while studying at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, Leigh fell in love with Herbert Lee Hullman, a calm, mature lawyer, 13 years her senior. She left the spotlight and married him in December 1932. Less than a year later, at age 19, she gave birth to a daughter, Suzanne. However, for Leigh, the marriage felt more like a compromise than a source of genuine happiness. The turning point came when her manager suggested she change her stage name. The name Vivien Holman sounded too ordinary, lacking the glamour a rising star needed. After rejecting several unsatisfactory suggestions, she chose the surname Leigh, taken from her husband's middle name, and transformed Vivien into Vivien, a more sophisticated, elegant, and slightly mysterious version. And that name quickly became legendary. In 1935, Leigh captivated audiences with her performance as Henriette in The Mask of Virtue. Her acting won over audiences, and critics showered her with praise. Around that time, she happened to see a play starring a rising actor named Laurence Olivier. The moment she saw him on stage, Lee whispered to her friend, "I'm going to marry that man." The problem was, both she and Olivier were already married, but Vivien Leigh's heart knew no bounds. One evening, after Olivier finished his performance, Leigh quietly slipped backstage. They exchanged only a few words before she suddenly planted a light kiss on his neck and left, leaving Olivier stunned. That spark quickly ignited into a raging fire. As they both starred in a fierce battle scene in the skies over England, they went from colleagues to confidants, and soon to lovers. Olivier abandoned his wife and children, defying the scandal to be with Leigh, but the constraints of their legal marriage still bound them. Neither Holman, Leigh's husband, nor Olivier's wife would agree to a divorce. Their relationship had to be kept secret. A secret passion lived in the shadows, both intoxicating and frightening, knowing that such love could ruin their reputations and careers. By 1937, Vivien Leigh seemed to have it all: a rising career and the devotion of a handsome leading man. She believed she was invulnerable until the first signs of mental illness began to appear. During a performance of Hamlet, while playing the frail Olivier, she suddenly fell into a violent bipolar episode. When Olivier entered the dressing room, he found his wife screaming at him, but only seconds later, she returned to her calm, composed state, as if nothing had happened. This was one of the first clear signs that her mental illness was worsening, a crack that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Not long after, an unexpected accident left Leigh with a broken ankle, confining her to bed. During those long, exhausting days, she turned to books to dispel her boredom. It was then that Margaret Mitchell's monumental novel, Gone with the Wind, captivated her. Hearing that David Olsnick was preparing to adapt it into a film, Leigh was convinced that Scarlett O'Hara was her destiny. She asked her manager to arrange an audition, but Selnik refused. To him, Leigh looked too English, while Scarlett embodied the fiery spirit of the American South. However, Vivien Leigh was never the type to easily accept defeat. Her determination was so intense that Olivier once remarked, "She pursued the role with a devilish fanaticism." Finally, luck smiled upon her when Myron Selnik, David's brother and Olivier's agent, became convinced that Leigh was perfect for the role. Thanks to him, the door to the audition opened. At that meeting, Leigh lit up the room with a performance that was both fiery and exquisitely detailed. As a result, she won the role of Scarlett O'Hara, a role that would forever change her destiny. But success wasn't without its challenges. Filming Gone with the Wind was hell. Production dragged on for months, and Leigh was pushed to the brink of exhaustion, working up to 16 hours a day. 3 directors came and went, leaving the entire crew exhausted and stressed. Her co-star, Clark Gable, was paid 5 times her salary, even though Leigh had to shoulder nearly double the workload. At times, both she and Gable believed the film would be a box office failure. However, fate proved otherwise. Gone with the Wind became a global cinematic phenomenon, holding the record for the highest-grossing film in history when adjusted for inflation. At age 26, Vivien Leigh was announced as the winner of the Best Actress Oscar, turning her into a legend overnight. But behind that glorious night lay a horrific scene. Olivier, the man she loved and adored, couldn't contain his jealousy. According to his son, on the way home after the ceremony, Olivier snatched the golden statuette and nearly smashed it on his wife. Years later, he admitted that in that moment he had gone mad with jealousy. However, 1940 marked the legalization of their love. In August, they finally divorced their previous spouses and became husband and wife. However, the price was high. Both Leigh and Olivier had to relinquish their legal custody of their children to be together. Their wedding was a quiet affair with only a few close friends and screen icon Katharine Hepburn as bridesmaid. The joy was short-lived. Their first joint project, Romeo and Juliet, was a disastrous failure. They had invested over $1,000 in the play, but the play quickly faded into oblivion, leaving both disappointed and financially struggling. At the same time, Lee's bipolar disorder worsened. Her manager recalled, "She would become furious, her voice hoarse, harsh, and full of contempt. But the most terrifying thing was her eyes. They turned into the cold gaze of a stranger." After such outbursts, Lee often couldn't remember what had happened. All she felt was fear, shame, and overwhelming regret. In 1943, while volunteering in North Africa to boost the morale of Allied soldiers, Vivien Leigh suddenly collapsed. Her illness dragged on, leaving her frail until a year later, when doctors finally diagnosed her with tuberculosis. At the time, they believed she was cured. But years later, Leigh and those close to her realized the truth. It was only a half-hearted diagnosis. The disease continued to silently thrive in her weakened lungs. Having narrowly escaped death, Leigh longed to return to the spotlight. In 1944, she resolved to revive her career. However, Hollywood did not welcome her back as she had hoped. All the roles she accepted were failures. Leigh desperately wanted to appear in Rebecca, directed by Olivier, but the role went to Joan Fontaine. Soon after, she turned down a role in Pride and Prejudice, a decision she would regret for years. These successive failures devastated her, and fate dealt her even more severe blows. In 1945, while filming Caesar and Cleopatra, Leigh, pregnant, suffered a tragic accident. A single slip on the polished floor caused her to